Okie dokie. Now we're on. And that's working a lot better than the last one. Okie doke. Fantastic. And boom, I think we're up. All right. Ronald, it might be 5 a.m. for you. It's not for me. Good to see everyone. I'm doing well, not your typical web. Good to see you, everyone. Books to follow? The Art of Deduction? Are you asking what books that you need to read for deduction? The monographs, Marie Konikovan's Mastermind, How to Think Like Sherlock Holmes, What Everybody is Saying by Joe Navarro, Mind Palace, How to Memorize and Surmise Like Sherlock Holmes by Ron White. Those will get you started. Hello from Poland, Philip. Yes, I am in front of my computer. Yes, it is a salt lamp. Good find right there. Ronald, you don't have to have notifications on your phone on, dude. I don't make these streams specifically for you. You can still sleep. I mean, make more videos on how to deduce a person. That is exactly what I'm going to be working on. Have a script lineup all planned out on the methodology of deduction, so that is something that is coming very soon. Do I plan on making any detailed blogs in the future? No, I got started on a blog, theartofdeductivereasoning.wordpress.com, if you're interested in checking it out. It was early on, so it's not that good of a blog. I prefer YouTube. So, can you deduce a person online? I assume you mean from like Facebook and other social media platforms. Can you determine things about them? In general, yes, you can determine some things about them, particularly what they would like to think of themselves, which can give you insight as to the type of person that they are, but you don't get that quite as much data as you would need for more accuracy. So the conclusions that you're going to be drawing are going to be broad, and they're going to be fewer. Daedric444, did I get your email? I might have. What was your email? Was it a picture? If it was a picture to deduce for the Deductionist Proving Ground series, I will get to it eventually. I just have so many. Oh, glad to hear that you like my video on having a clear mind, Veronica. How do you determine someone's dominant hand? I have a video on that. It's Deduction Minute Episode 2. It's literally entitled How to Deduce a Person's Dominant Hand, and it's got a thumbnail with me holding my hands up like this. Can deduction be used for poker? To a certain extent, sure, but you're going to be more using body language, reading, and memory systems. So the memory systems will play in counting cards. So you can memorize a deck of cards as long as you have a peg for each card. So, for instance, right. Get my deck of cards out here. So if you're playing a game and you're counting cards, right? So 2 of clubs in my mind is like a crew of miniature workers, and it's in a spot in my journey that I use for my mind palace. Okay, and so I have a couple rooms dedicated to counting cards in my mind palace. So if two of clubs was the first card in the deck, then I would imagine like a miniature crew of little workers working on the first peg in that journey, which in this case would actually be that first drawer on my dresser right there. So, and open it up, and there's a pair of jeans on the right side. That's the first peg. And then you go through the deck, and you use memory systems to memorize the cards, which will help your odds, which will help you to determine which cards have been played. That might not work as much in poker, but facial expressions, nonverbal communication, reading, that's going to be your key play in using deduction in poker. Of course, be responsible. Uh, I don't necessarily endorse gambling, but if you are going to gamble, do not spend more money than you are able to lose. Can deduction help in paranormal investigation? Well, define paranormal for one. Two, what is the nature of the investigation into the paranormal that you are doing? Is it a skeptical investigation? So are you trying to debunk, or are you trying to ratify paranormal claims? Either stance is the wrong one to take, because in any sort of debate or looking into something that is debated and is not conclusive, you need to have as much of an open mind as you possibly can, which of course you can't have a completely open mind because you're a human being and human beings are prone to biases, but there are certain things that you can do to help stave off those biases. So just in that, the mindset that we bring to deduction helps with being more objective, which can help with any sort of investigation into something that is a debated topic, right? And so if let's say you're ghost hunting, right? You're going through a well-known haunted house, and let's say you're experiencing certain things and you're wondering whether or not these experiences are genuine spirits or whether they're psychosomatic. You could use deductive logical thought processes to before going in, compile lists of different experiences that that other people have experienced at that place, right? Or just thematic, because well, that could damage your experiment. You could look up thematic occurrences within paranormal experiences. You could cross-reference those with the things that you're experiencing. You could cross-reference that with the psychological explanations for the things that can be explained, and to determine and narrow down whether or not those experiences are psychosomatic. You could set up as many physical things as you possibly could to help test as to whether or not there are actually ghosts moving things around. That's how I would start to formulate it in my head if I was interested in researching or applying deduction to paranormal investigation. That's not really my interest. That's not really my thing, but that's how I would go about it. There was an interesting question, and then I lost it. There's almost no one to talk to about deduction in Brazil. Fun fact, we speak Portuguese and not Spanish. I think I did know that you speak... Wait. Yeah, I'm not so well versed in languages as far as geographic spoken languages are concerned. But that is an interesting little fun fact. I do need to get more educated on the spoken languages in different countries. That's one of the things I want to do, as well as a study in accents, which will actually involve you guys. I'll be making an announcement video about that soon. As for there's almost no one to talk to in Brazil about deduction, that's understandable, I suppose. It's kind of hard to find someone to talk to about deduction here, even. So I can definitely see the plight that you have. And there's plenty of online communities that are around now. There's obviously this live stream, my YouTube channel. There are different groups, Google Plus groups, WhatsApp groups, dedicated to discussing deduction and bouncing ideas off of each other. They usually start advertising themselves in the comment section of these streams. So, there you go. Please give some tips on deducing a person. Well, so the series that I'm going to be starting is with my next video that I'm coming out with is going to be called The Methodology of Deduction. And so in that video, I'm going to introduce my methodology that I bring to reading a person. Okay. And so the basic concept is that it comes down to breaking a person and the data you observe on them into 4 key components, right? 4 data sets. There's physicality, so that is things such as their body type, tan lines, tattoos, eye color, hair, fitness level, activity level, dominant hand, condition of nails, hygienic condition, grooming habits, shaving habits, all those different things fall under physicality. So essentially the person without any clothes on, if you want to think about it like that. And then, of course, there is the attire and paraphernalia. So all their clothes and accessories and the things that pertain to and are on those clothes, right? And that could also translate to other accessories that the person carries, such as jewelry, even phones. I would classify under this category. And then the next category is verbal communication. Of course, this has to do with what a person says, but more importantly, it has to do with how they say it. So this has to do with vocal pitch, change in pitch, sentence structure, diction, vocabulary, all those different things relating to the person's cognition, potential changes in their verbal baseline to see if perhaps they are lying or if there is some other thought process going in their head constricting their vocal patterns or changing their vocal patterns. This could also do with accents and all those different things. And then there's, of course, the area of nonverbal communication, and that has to do with gestures, expressions, micro-gestures, micro-expressions, establishing a nonverbal baseline, looking for deviations in that baseline, lie detection, although lie detection is the most difficult and least accurate part of nonverbal communication reading. So that's how I approach reading a person. And we'll be going in more depth on this topic in this whole series. The video I'm working on now is just an overview of all that I just described. And then the videos that follow that are going to go into like mini series on each of those topics, right? And so several videos on each of those going into the specifics. And of course, panning out, one last tip, panning out from the person themselves, looking at the situation in which you find a person. So that would be the time, the location, and the speed with which they are traveling in that time and location. Those are all very important things you need to be aware of. Do you think that high-paced video games would help or destroy someone's ability to observe? On one hand, you're focusing on the target with all the information happening and entering your brain. Well, whenever you enter into a high-intensity situation, particularly for males, there's going to be constricting of the vision. The pupils will constrict. There will be tunnel vision. The brain will focus more on individual things and switch between them very quickly. The body will enter into a more autopilot mode. There's going to be that freeze, fight, flight response activating. So adrenaline dumps, increased heart rate, increased breathing, all those different things, those physiological things will impact your cognition. So anytime there's any sort of intensity, so this could be from the scale of fighting in a war, hunting an animal, or all the way to simulated combat like sports, or simulated combat digitally like video games. um, those physiological responses are still there. Our brain still treats stuff like that, which our conscious mind, our prefrontal cortex, knows is a game. It treats it in the same way as a life or death scenario physiologically. So yes, it will make it more difficult to observe in the traditional sense that we try and apply with a calm, collected approach, as in deduction. um, but that is the way it is, and you can train your brain to be more uh, when you train your brain in those ideal settings where you train your brain to be more reflective and more cognitively focused and less prone to reactionary outbursts, when you do enter into situations where you do have to go into that autopilot stage, your brain's presets will be more in line with that reflective thought process. It will be more in line with looking for things that would be relevant in deduction. It would be more in line with doing stuff like that than it would be without all that training that you've put in. So, with the training that we do, it rewires our brain to where when we do allocate things to the subconscious now acts more in line with the process that we've been training our conscious mind to follow. So that's the interesting thing of the return on investment with all those hours of training that you put into your cognition and deduction as a whole. Well, I branch out into other topics relating to deduction. Well, I'm starting a true crime series, so yes, I already have done that, and I will continue to do more branching out. What do you think of looking at the difference in eye contact, knowing how it reveals if they're telling the truth or not? Here's the one thing that you need to understand about nonverbal communication. There is no specific tell that will 100% tell you if a person is lying. There is no tell that is necessarily a 100% of the time indicator of deception. When we're looking for deception, we're looking for incongruencies in nonverbal grammar, which sounds really boring. But what that means is you're looking for body language and facial expressions that don't line up with each other, or don't line up with the words that they're saying or the vocal pitch that they're using. So in normal conversation, people will be blinking, they'll be looking off, remembering something, they'll be looking off, imagining something. They will look directly at you, they'll make eye contact, maybe they'll look away if they feel imposed, because staring into someone's eyes for too long, if it's not a emotional connection, can make the person feel uncomfortable, because looking into a person's eyes um, is seen as a challenge, and this is the same with animals too. Looking in the eyes of like a monkey, for instance, they will attack you, and that has to do with the movement of the eye is extremely important. We have detection circuitry wired into our brains to know where other people are looking and follow their gaze instantly, because it's extremely important to survival to know what people are looking at. That goes for people who are on your side. What did they just look at? Is it something that's going to kill us all? People who are not on your side, people who are your adversaries, what did they look at? Are they looking at their co-conspirators? Are they looking at a weapon? What are they looking at? Your brain is designed to look for those eye movements. So eye movements are not going to be it's not that people telling the truth will always look you in the eye. In fact, that's actually typically a sign that the person is over concentrating on the thing that they're saying and over concentrating on looking sincere. So eye movement can tell you some things, but you have to look at it with the context of all the rest of the nonverbal communication you observe. Uh, have I thought about setting up training models to develop these skills set or to refine them? Yes, in fact. And if you are keen, there's a link to my Patreon down below. What I'm doing, it's a bit of an experiment right now. What I'm doing is for people who donate $10 a month, they'll be given access to 2 live sessions with Skype sessions with me a month, where we go over, where I go more in depth into the really advanced concepts of deduction. And in that class, I've only got one student so far. In that class, I'm going to be going over the training methods that the person needs to do to hone the brain, because it's not just about the methodology, it's about establishing the mindset and establishing the brain's really geography, and rewiring your brain to work in a more efficient way for this thought process. So yes, there are plenty of um, uh, mind games you can play to help you uh, train these different functions of the brain that are all used in deduction. So I kind of break it down into, you've got memory, you've got logic, and reasoning. You have um, focus and attention, and uh, so those three, you have to train those 3 areas, um, and they kind of all build off of each other as well. You have to have a good memory. You have to be able to Um, oh, and observation, of course, as well. You have to be observant. You have to have a good memory. You have to be very logical, and you have to have a clear control over your focus and attention, and be able to consciously divert your brain's resources as you see fit. Now, if you want to donate and be a part of that class, we'll go into those training exercises. I will help you learn those training exercises. Um, but just play around with those categories and you'll figure out ways to train them. So is cold reading related to deduction, the logic and analyzing part? So for those of you who don't know, cold reading is a technique used by um, psychics and mentalists to get a read off of a person. It's not as complex as the deductive methodology that we go over, but it's you can employ it for a general read on a person. Uh, Definitely, especially if you've got limited time. My friend Logan on Observe, he did a video defrauding psychics, and one of those a series on that, and one of those episodes was about cold reading. So be sure to check that out if you're interested in that. Is the concept of mind palace and etiquette memory same? Not quite. I'm not familiar with etiquette memory, so you'd have to define that before I can really answer your question. Oh, Daedric 444, you're Logan. Okay, you're my student. Okay. Yes, I do have I am putting together a schedule for you. I'm sorry, this month has been kind of weird for uh for the class I'm still figuring out. You will get those other 3 classes this month. We'll do that. We'll try and do that this weekend. I did get your email. I just wasn't able to respond. Um that being said, if we don't get the rest of the 3 next month, you can have 5. Oh, okay. So photographic memory. Yeah, photographic memory and mind palace different. So photographic memory is having a very reliable visual memory, as in you look at something and then remember it almost identically to what it actually is. The mind palace has to do with visualization, and those aren't the same things. Visualization has to do with your brain's ability to construct structures visually through your imagination. There is an element of visual memory at play with this because we do use physical buildings as the base for our mind palace and our memories of those buildings, but it's not the same thing as photographic memory. Yeah, if you want to join my classes, for 2 classes a month, it's $10 on my Patreon, so $10 a month. For 4 classes a month, it's $20 a month. So James, talk about something else. Any suggestions? Have you used deduction gain an upper hand in an interview or any other situation for that matter? Occasionally, but I tend to be non-confrontational. And I haven't really been put in situations at this juncture in my life where I have had to use deduction to gain the upper hand. Usually it's just experimental for me. There's no need to gain the upper hand. I just want to see if, hypothetically speaking, if I needed to, I could. So sometimes I do employ some social engineering techniques that I'm learning, but nothing ever destructive so far. I think I got a question earlier about how to build a mind palace. I gotta. Oh wait, this one's good. Okay, this guy must watch Rick and Morty. Okay, I've gotten comments like this before. Okay, so I have watched Rick and Morty before, but I actually kind of hate it. And it's funny for what it is. On occasions, I can appreciate the humor, but it is probably one of the dumbest shows I've ever seen. And apparently, I sound or act like a Rick and Morty fan, which is odd, because I thought Rick and Morty fans were the guys who like shouted "Pickle Rick" all the time, or something, or stupid references like that that only Rick and Morty fans and people who see the occasional meme are going to really understand. Uh, so, uh, yes, I have watched Rick and Morty. No, I'm not that much of a Rick and Morty fan. It's just it's a show that likes to think it's really smart or pretends it's really smart and it really knows that it's not. So, I mean, I appreciate the humor. I don't appreciate the fan base whatsoever. Worst situation deduction has gotten you in, and are you an anime fan? Uh, well, I've had some awkward moments where I've just made an erroneous conclusion, and then I've gotten uh, laughed at a couple times. Uh, so, but usually it's just awkward for me when I'm wrong. Um, so that's probably the worst situation I've gotten in deduction. Again, non-confrontational type of person. So, uh, and am I an anime fan? I like certain animes, but I mean, I like anime. I like the animation style. Artistically speaking, I think that's it's just beautiful style of animation. I do like various different animes for the story and all that, but I'm not the kind of guy who's gonna sit down for 12 hours and watch nothing but anime. If I find a good anime, I'll watch it. But I don't actively go out and look for anime. I don't really have the time to watch a lot of anime, so I just don't. And there are other shows that I might want to watch. So my brother's more of the hardcore anime fan. Do I think geniuses are born or made? Well, there's a bit of both. So you can improve your IQ score over time to a certain extent. But for the most part, a lot of IQ has to do with the actual structure of the tissue in your brain and how good the fibers are, how good the neurons are. That has to do with genetic constitution. If you come from a good genetic line and you roll the genetic dice and you get really lucky and you end up with good brain tissue, you're gonna have a higher IQ. That's part of how the neurology plays into the cognition. Um, so in that sense, geniuses are born, but you have to determine what type of geniuses are we talking about, because there's you can be a genius in a particular skill and not necessarily score over 145 on your IQ test. You can be a genius artist, a genius um, a musician, and not be a genius in the IQ sense. So, I mean, there is a level of skill versus talent. So talent is what you're more born with, and then skill is what you work to achieve. And of course, I'm oversimplifying the concept of IQ, and I do need to do more research into it myself to have a better understanding of it. But disclaimer: it's a rudimentary explanation. But is concerned, the word is thrown around so loosely that it you could define it in a very variety of different ways. Um, and so, to a certain extent, yes, geniuses are born. You can make yourself better. You can improve yourself in a certain area to where you can be considered a genius in that field. But usually, the word genius is applied to a person who has natural talent, who naturally has an affinity for a particular thing. So, in that sense, geniuses are born. What authors have I followed that have helped my deductive reasoning? Well, firstly, common misconception is that deduction, as we talk about it here, refers to pure deductive reasoning. That's not the case. We do use deductive reasoning in this process, but we also use a combination of inductive and abductive. So take that as you will. It all has to depend. It all depends on the information you're dealing with and the situation itself as to what reasoning you apply to it. We just call it deduction because that's the colloquial term. That's what most people associate with the term. So I mean, it's just easier to call it deduction. But anyway, so as for authors that I follow, Ben Cardall, phenomenal mentalist, deductionist. He's written a book called The Monographs. Definitely recommend that read. Maria Konnikova, she wrote a book, Mastermind: How to Think Like Sherlock Holmes. She has a PhD in psychology. Fantastic book for training, for learning how your brain works and training your brain to go into that more reflective thought process. As far as body language goes, Paul Ekman, read his books. Joe Navarro has written a good book on body language. So those are authors that I have followed. Oh, there was a question before on how to build a mind palace. Let me get to that real quick. So for a mind palace, you need a building. So like a physical building in the real world, like say for instance this house, this room. And then you find pieces of furniture or just different objects in that room and you number them. So, like I said before, uh, you can't really see it right now because it's so dark, but this dresser right here, the bottom shelf right there, is where is the first peg in my mind palace. So what you're doing is creating a journey where you always go through it the same way. So every time I close my eyes and go into my mind palace, I will open that drawer and look to the right. And on the right, there's a pair of jeans, right? And on that pair of jeans, I said earlier that I use this room for counting cards. So on the pair of jeans, I would have a peg that relates to a card, right? So, and then next to that, there's a pair of shorts. And so that's my next peg. Then I close that drawer, then I open the next drawer, and then I look at the shirt that's here, and then the shirt that's here, and those are the next two pegs. And then I close that drawer, open the next drawer, and then and then I close that drawer, and then the lamp right here is the next peg, then it's that thing. And so every time I walk through the mind palace, I go through that journey, and then there's another one right there, and I go through the same way every time. And that repetition will help you build those images in your mind. So each object that you stop at, each piece of furniture that you stop at, is a place where you will encode a memory through visualization, right? So, the way you build the mind palace is you actually go to the physical place, like this room, and you go through that journey physically a bunch of times, like 10 times a night for a week, right? To really sear that into your brain, really get those images down pat to where you just close your eyes and boom, you're in your mind palace. Then you can start thinking about encoding things, and then you can start thinking about adding more rooms as you need more space, right? Read The Wisdom of Psychopaths by Kevin Dutton. Sure. Gucci says, I'm going to clap your cheeks. Ouch. I just answered your question, Nikhil Jumani, on how to create a mind palace. If you just logged back on to the stream, I know some people click off and then click back on. I literally just finished explaining it. What do color patterns tell you about a person? Well, in a broad sense, people tend to gravitate towards certain colors based off of personality. So this has to do with what various colors represent to us culturally, as well as just hardwired into our brain. So, for instance, red is a color that universally makes people feel more aggressive emotions, even subtly. Why is that? Well, when you cut yourself open, you have red inside of you that pours out. Same thing for something you are trying to kill. When you are trying to kill something or something is trying to kill you, it is beneficial to have more aggressive emotions so that you have a higher chance of either surviving or killing the thing that you're trying to kill, or both. So when we see the color red, it reminds us of blood. Blood reminds us of things like anger, aggression. So, blue, on the other hand, is the color of the sky, it's the color of the water, which are both very calming things. So those things calm us down more, help us those colors stimulate us to think more reflectively. So, in a general sense, a more outgoing, impulsive person will probably gravitate towards warm and bright colors. A more reserved and slow thinking analytical person is going to gravitate towards cooler colors, darker colors, neutral tones. So I mean, just you kind of have to feel it out a little bit, and sometimes obviously it's not going to be that way every time. Like, there are days where I wear a red shirt and I'm a pretty reserved, not very impulsive person. So I don't wear a red shirt very often. I typically wear gray, black, blue. But obviously, there will be outliers. You have to observe everything in context. Don't base a deduction about a person's personality based solely off of the color of their clothes. That's just asking for trouble. But it is a piece of information you can use. A little anecdote. When I was younger, like 12, I started only wearing red shoes, and back then I was a much more open and impulsive person. And as I started to become more of a reserved and analytical person, I started getting gray shoes and then black shoes. So that's a little anecdote for you. How old am I? 18. See, there, Dak Fawcett says, I'll just grab whatever clothing I have lying around at the time. No care to how it looks, really. There you go. There's an outlier. Although the fact that you just randomly grab clothes will have other tells for a keen observer. Maybe the colors don't match. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that you probably don't fold your clothes immediately after washing, so they're probably wrinkled. So that would also be a tell that a person like me would observe. And so those two things would indicate slight disorganization and lack of attention to appearance, which would go to speak to somewhat of a lack of caring towards what people think about you. And so I'd cross-reference that with your level of hygiene and see if this has to do with more self-respect, or if this just has to do with asocial, being asocial. Sorry, I can't talk right now. And so, of course, the whole idea is observing in context. And then you go on to say, I've got nobody to impress, so why bother? I didn't even read that comment. However, I remember you made a video about clothes look that change rather than color, like tucked in, untucked, wrinkled, or ironed. Yeah, those things do play a role. George Axon says, I just came here. What's he talking about? I was talking about the methodology of deduction, as we do on this channel. What about the color people wear? I just explained that. Stephen Olson asks, have you thought about doing an internship with a private investigator? No. I do want to interview some detectives, retired and active, and kind of pick their brains a little bit, see their methodology. But I'm a little bit too busy with a job to, and to have an internship at this moment. So, Dak Fawcett says, oh, that's cool. You drag so much out of that. Thank you. Zevin Williams is back. Crown Admiral says race deductions. If you're asking about if you can make deductions based off of a person's race, racial profiling is fundamentally flawed because it assumes that something as simple and arbitrary as the concentration of melanin around the nuclei of skin cells, which only exists to block out UV radiation from damaging the DNA of the skin cells and thus preventing things like cancers. Racial profiling assumes that has something to do with cognition, which it doesn't. So racial profiling, therefore, is fundamentally flawed, and you shouldn't judge people based off of their race. Now, can you get something about the culture, determine something about a person based off of the culture they adhere to? Sure. Yeah. And yes, cultures do sometimes fall overlap with ethnic lines. So, but you have to actually observe the person participating in a particular culture to actually draw that conclusion. You can't draw that from their actual ethnicity. That would just be a horrendous leap in logic and bigoted, and just no. It's your nighttime, isn't it? Well, yes. It's dark. I'm surprised he always gets my name right, says Zevin Williams. Well, I think I got it wrong the first time. Holmes Sherlock says, deduction requires logic and math requires logic. And are you good at deduction and you're good at mathematics too, or is deduction, logic, and math different? Okay, I think I can dissect what you were trying to ask. So essentially, if you're good at deduction, are you good at math? Is mathematics necessary skill to be good at in order to be deduction? So for me, I never performed above average in mathematics classes. although I did perform above average in science classes, oddly enough. So whenever equations for me were put into the context of, let's say, chemistry or physics or biology, whenever mathematics was put into the context of the practical world, I understood it a lot better. If you score bad on your mathematics tests, I don't think that necessarily means that you're bad at math. And to answer your initial question, there is a direct correlation between mathematic capabilities and a person's logical faculties, because mathematics is a very it's a very abstract form of logic. So it's not articulated in the same way as, say, like linguistic logic, but the same fundamental principles apply. So I don't think that if you score bad in math classes that you're necessarily naturally bad at math. I just think that the way in which we conceptualize and teach mathematics is fundamentally flawed. And mathematicians have explained that the base 10 number system that we have is the wrong way to go. So why do we have 10 numbers? We have 0 to 9, right? So you start at 1 and then you get to 9 and then you add, and then you put the 0 and the 1 together and you've got 10. So a 10 base number system, that's what 10 base number system means. Why do we have a 10 base number system? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's easy to count on your fingers. You have 10 fingers, therefore we have a 10 base number system. When you get into very high level math, calculus, and all that, 10 base number system becomes slightly problematic. It's actually better to have a base 12 or base 16 number system. And I forget, I think it was the Sumerian culture that had a base 12 number system. I might be wrong on that. I'm probably wrong on that, but it's one of those ancient cultures that had a different base number system than the one that we use. So just on that alone, our bases are a little bit flawed in the way that we conceptualize math and the way that we teach it, especially in America. It's not geared to actually help people really understand mathematics. I've read several books on from different mathematicians on how to get better at math and getting over those hurdles of, you know, learning different math tricks like how to add and multiply and subtract and divide more quickly. Like, instead of solving a math problem from right to left, you should solve it left to right, because just like we read words left to right, we should solve math left to right. So if you've got 53 plus 49, you shouldn't add the 3 and the 9 first. You should add the 4 and the 5. So 4 and the 5 is 9. And then the 3 and the 9 is 12. And then you carry the 1. So that's 5, 6, and then 63. Sorry, 103, because I can't do math right now. But the concept is that you take the bigger numbers, so 50 and 40 instead of 53 and 49, right? So 5 and 4 make 9, and then you add the 3 and the 9 together, which makes 12, and then you add the 90 with the 12, which you could break down into 90 and 10. So that's 100 and then 102. I think I'm doing that right. I'm extremely tired, so I might not have done that completely wrong. So, but anyway, there's a lot to be said about the way that we teach math and the way that we conceptualize it, which isn't intuitive. It's not the way that we conceptualize it isn't intuitive, and the way that we teach it, especially in America, is not designed to help people learn. So people might have a good logical capacity, and they might excel in articulating ideas linguistically, but they might perform badly in math because they just simply didn't figure, it never clicked, the conceptualization of the mathematics never really clicked, and so they were never able to apply their logical faculties to mathematics. Which is why providing context with math usually helps people understand it better. Would someone like me, who loves to study psychology and statistics independently, not formally, be able to apply those skills to deduction? Absolutely. I'm going to be majoring in psychology this coming semester, and statistics is one of the classes that you have to take for that major. And it makes sense because statistical analysis and statistical probability plays a lot in understanding psychological trends. And I've been doing some studying with statistics. I'm going to try and take the CLEP test for that, and statistics is very interesting, and it's actually one of the maths categories that actually connects with me a little bit. So yeah, you can definitely apply statistical understanding to deduction. Good at things like good at geometry, but I'm rubbish at things like algebra. So that might have to do with perhaps you're better at visualizing objects. I know that I did really well in geometry, not so well in algebra 1 and algebra 2. Uh, and that might have to do with the fact that I was raised by an artist, and drawing and painting and creating things visually has always been a big part of my life. So geometry clicked more with me. Also, I was taking geometry in the first year that I was learning deduction, and of course, anyone who's taking geometry knows that you have to do geometric proofs with deductive and inductive reasoning. So that was really cool to me, and that really pushed me to learn geometry better. So there's a number of different factors to why a person might be better at one field of math than another. So if I'm tired, why am I live streaming? Because I like having these chats and I'm bored. Yeah, that's true. Just because you're tired doesn't mean you can sleep. I am insomniac. So anyway, we got any more questions? I think I've rambled on for long enough. How long has this been going on? Only 50 minutes. This is. Do you know what that means? It means he has problems streaming in the day, either because of his presence of family or just his busy schedule. Oh well, he answered it. And yeah, I have a job and I have a family, so yeah, I gotta wait till my mom and my sister go to sleep, and I've got to obviously be home from work. So in order to do these little streams. Host has a problem in his left eye. He not take bath latest 2 days. He spends most of his time at home and working late at night. May be book reading or thinking that he is a foodie. Almost wrong on everything. I don't have a problem with my left eye that I know of. My vision is 20/20, and I've gotten my vision checked recently. So I showered yesterday. I actually have a job, so I have to get up and go to work every morning, and then come home in the afternoon or evening, depending on how much work I have to do that day. So I don't spend all day at home. I do read, but I'm not reading currently because I'm on a live stream, and I'm not a foodie. I do enjoy food, although I'm not snobbish about it. I'll pretty much eat whatever's on my plate. Is it possible that you ever get solid deductions from a partly or fully anonymous environment, such as the internet? Well, this goes back to the social media question. you can get some things. It's very difficult to get a lot of things. The things that you will get are going to be broad. So you're going to make more broad deductions, and they're going to be a lot fewer deductions. That being said, you can get some semblance of a read based off of analysis of speech patterns and word choice. That's what I find to be the most telling. Although for things like Twitter, where there are character limits, this is difficult. So my new series, The Mind of Crime, is about what? It's a study of crime. And I mean, enough said. It's supposed to be a comprehensive true crime series with a gear towards educational and really understanding criminology, criminal activity, the psychology behind crime, criminal traits, criminal trends, history of crime, organized crime, serial killers. It's all about understanding the actual concepts rather than glorifying it. So there's a lot of shows out there that like to go through famous cases and show you how the investigation went down, and it inadvertently leads to the glorification of these horrific criminals. And so that's not really my goal. My goal is just to understand crime as much as possible, because I'm going to be double majoring in psychology and criminal justice with the intent to eventually start an independent consultation and research firm that studies all things from crime to psychology to nonverbal communication, and uses that research in a consultation setting. So, do I take walks in ungodly hours, even in the most unpleasant weather conditions? You do know me too well. I just got done watching Thor Ragnarok for the third time. It's so good. Sorry, that was off topic. Well, Gabby Jackson, I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I haven't seen it yet. The trailer looked really good, and I'm a fan of Cate Blanchett, so. You said you have a job. You also said you're 18, which means you probably have a part-time job. You also said you're majoring in psychology next semester, which implies you're in college right now. I'm actually taking a gap year and focusing on work, although I am part-time, although my hours are really flexible at the place I'm working at. It's a really cool job at this research institute. I work in the media department, so I edit podcasts and shoot videos and stuff like that. That's what I do. Have I seen Mindhunter? Twice. I love that show. Stephen Olson says, thanks for the reference material to develop greater understanding on all 3 points of deductive aspects. Love the channel. Keep up the great work. Bedtime. Well, good night, man. Glad that you got some worth out of this little brain fart of mine. Does anyone want to know a translation from English to Portuguese? Are you talking about what the things that I'm saying? Are you offering to translate? Hang on 1 second. If you want, you can go through some of my old videos and add translated captions. If you want. I mean, that's a thing that you could do with your free time. Questions. Did I skip one? How exactly can you observe people without looking like a creep? This is one way. But also, I mean, that is a legitimate way to avoid looking like a creep, although sometimes sunglasses can make you look like a creep. But you want to develop your visual memory as much as possible. So being able to look at a person, take a snapshot that's reliable enough to where you can deduce from the memory, from the visual memory that you've stored of that snapshot of the person. So, for people who don't have photographic memory like myself, what I did to start out with was I would take a glance at a person, look at them for a couple seconds, look up and down, and then I'd look away and I would work my reasoning based off of that snapshot that I took. And every time that image in my mind would start to fade away, I would look back. Or if any time I realized I hadn't observed something enough and I needed to look at it more closely, I'd look back at the person. So in that way, you can act as though you're just looking around aimlessly and keep on going back to looking at the person, so that you're not maintaining eye contact for uh, a creepy amount of time. That's one way to go about it. This also helps, like when you're walking past someone, if you get a snapshot of the person and they walk past you, they're gone. You're not going to be able to look at them anymore, and you can make your deductions still based off of just the image you have in your mind. Has it ever crossed my mind that Sherlock Holmes is essentially the product of a human imagination? Therefore, maybe the art of deduction might actually be a completely fictional. I'm actually addressing this in my next video. So, fictional characters like Sherlock Holmes that take deduction and embellish it, you'll never be able to get to the skill level of those characters because they're fictional and because there are embellishments made for dramatic effect. That being said, Sherlock Holmes himself, the fictional character, was based off of a real-life person, Dr. Joseph Bell, who employed a very similar methodology, although not to the extent of Sherlock Holmes, because again, Sherlock was embellished, right? So Dr. Joseph Bell was able to diagnose patients based off of observation alone. He was also able to determine things like occupation and status and things that they had done in their lives that could be relevant into diagnosis. He got very good at that, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle learned that skill from him and then wrote that skill into this character of Sherlock Holmes. There's also the fact that I know from personal experience that this works. I have made deductions and I have confirmed them with people. I know that it works. I'm not the first person to make it work. There are people like Ben Cardall, Darren Brown, older mentalists who have since passed, or other mentalists that are out there right now, who take this and they use this skill with striking accuracy. So yes, there's the embellishment of fictional characters, well, rather the embellishment of a particular skill embodied by a fictional character. So you shouldn't base your goals on what Sherlock was able to do, because you're not going to be able to get that good. It's just feasibly impossible. And with the original stories, those stories were a lot more true to life. The embellishments with the original stories were fewer, and they were less extreme than, say, the modern adaptations, like BBC Sherlock. I love that show, but oh my goodness. Talk about breaking the suspension of disbelief. I do not have a photographic memory. How much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? I have no idea. 12? Is that a viable answer? Is graphology important for deduction? It depends on the situation. I mean, if you've got a note left by a person and you're trying to determine whether or not a particular person wrote that note, applying graphology is a viable form of deduction. Although It should be noted that the graphology isn't an exact science, uh, so there's that to take into account. That being said, I did do some study on it in a forensic science class that I took a couple years ago. So you know, there is certain worth and merit in graphology. In but in regular, ordinary, day-to-day deductions, you're not going to use it that much. You're probably going to use it a lot more if you get into mentalism. For instance, one of the mentalist tricks that I'm working on right now, a couple of them have to do with handwriting analysis. Um, so, I mean, you can use it sometimes. If you're getting into mentalism and performing deduction on stage and stuff, it's a fun trick that you can use. So yeah. Can we build a photographic memory? You can certainly improve your visual memory's accuracy through training. One of the ways I do this is by taking a handful of coins and dumping them on a table, looking at them, closing my eyes, and seeing if I can count the coins based off the image in my head. And when you get good enough, then you can start to count. Okay, those were quarters, those were nickels, those were dimes, and then you can actually count up the amount of money that's there, as well as the number of coins. And then as your visual memory gets even better and better and better, you remember which ones were heads up and which ones were tails up, right? So that's a simple exercise you can do to get better at training your visual memory. You got to do it consistently, though, every day. I would say it'll do it 10 times a day. Do I have a mind palace? Yes. What do you do when it does become creepy and you still want to make deductions? Oh, okay. Well, I try and remind myself that I'm never going to see this person again. I don't really care what they think. So why am I feeling intimidated? And then it becomes this game of wanting to intimidate them more. Uh, so especially if it's a dude, because male competition does, even I'm not above that. So um, if you do start getting the look from people, they're like, why are you looking at me? I don't like that. And they start staring you down. At that point, I just I just stare them down until they look away, and then I continue on my business, because I don't like being I don't like territorial displays like that being imposed on me. And if someone is going to impose a territorial display, because staring at a person is a territorial display, um, I will stare at them longer, and they they will look away first, and that will make me feel better, and then I will continue along with my deductions of them. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. What Jordan is saying is so that the same questions aren't asked at every stream over and over again. Yeah, I do end up answering the same questions a lot. Good quote. Uh, Although it does help me conceptualize these things even better and understand them more, so I don't mind answering the same questions in multiple streams. Sometimes I think I'm closer to the autism spectrum if I'm not in it. Is there a test I can do to know if I am or not autistic? You can go to a place and get tested for autism. I was diagnosed as when I was 2 years old with low functioning. On the low functioning end of the spectrum, I was put into early intervention programs and such, and now I'm on the high functioning end of the spectrum. So I could go and get retested now to see if I'm still on the spectrum. Um, uh, I don't really know. Do some internet research on it. There's bound to be a psychologist that can evaluate you, or a doctor that can evaluate you and see if you're on the spectrum. There is a test to see that. I don't think there's an online test that has any sort of efficacy, but Are there some ways by which you can deduce a person without the person being present, or you have never seen them? Sure, we've gone over the fact that you can make deductions about a person's writing based off of um, sentence structure, word choice, diction, vocabulary, use of pronouns, all those different things. You can make certain deductions about the person. Um, so that would be, like, for instance, you're maybe reading a note that they left, which would be more formal writing, so you'd have to put take that variable into account. Or it could be like a message chat where you've never seen the person's face. And you're analyzing them based off of the words that they're saying as they're interacting with you. You can also make a decent read about a person based off of uh, another person describing them to you. One training technique that I really like, that I did with a friend. You need a friend to be able to do this. So basically, using their eyes uh, to observe. So you can do this with any friend who's out and about, and you text them, and you text them like, "Hey, look around you and hone in on a person," right? And then ask them what they see, and then they'll give you some lame general description, and then you ask to them to look at different things. Like, okay, look at how expensive their shoes are. Okay, look at their hands. Which hand are they favoring? Right. So you can do that, and you can make deductions without ever being there, as long as you have a person there to observe for you and to report that information back. And you can sort of visualize, and you'll have to ask very focused questions to get as accurate of a visualization as you possibly can. That's very important. So yeah, you can do that. What does Mind Palace do for deductions? Um, well, we apply stored and confirmed information that we okay. So you compile information about various topics, and you store it in your memory. This could be natural memory, and this could be Mind Palace. The Mind Palace is not a permanent storage facility. That's a common misconception. It's like a halfway house to your natural memory. So essentially, it's just a way of encoding information for a period of time to where you can go back and review it until it just sticks, and then you don't have to go back into your Mind Palace and look at the encoded information. The information just becomes something that you know. It's like, think of it as like notes that are always in your head and that you can always review. So, how does knowledge base play into deduction? Well, you need to be able to know about different things to be able to apply premises um, to any situations. Knowing things about different things will help you understanding things that those things relate to, if that sentence made any sense. So yes, memory is key in deduction. You can also use visual memory techniques to help you manage information that you are observing on a person. Let's say that you're studying a person for a fairly long time, and you've got a lot of information that you're juggling, right? And you're not remembering it all. You can use a visual memory system like that, like the Mind Palace, like the PEG system, like the Journey system, like the Link system. You can encode those observations and those inferences that you're playing with in a memory system, so that you can go back and look at them uh, and not be so worried about forgetting all the information that you're storing, or observing, or working with, because it can get hairy sometimes. You can also use memory systems to remember deductions you've made about a person. So let's say you've made deductions about your boss, right? And you really want to have that file on hand. You don't want to just throw those deductions away. You want to remember those deductions so that you don't have to continuously read him every time, read him again the next time that you see him. You can make a you can have a part of your mind palace dedicated to um, to deductions you've made about various people and encoding the deductions you've made about different people. So you can go to your mind palace, close your eyes, go to that room, look at the deductions you've made about your boss right before you go in to see him, so that it's fresh in your mind. You know his weaknesses, his strengths, these different things that you've deduced about him, which helps inform your interactions with that person. So for people, some of my critics like to say that this is a horrible way of distancing yourself from genuine social interaction. In this scenario, it's just a way of uh, strengthening and enriching social interaction, because you're understanding the person better and you're remembering more things about the person, which can help inform your social interaction. So it's cold in some ways, but it's not entirely devoid of merit. Is there a book or way to improve reading body language? I feel that people lie to me a lot, so I want to get better at it. A good book to start with is a book by Joe Navarro called "What Everybody Is Saying." Uh, Paul Ekman's work is also really good. There's also a book called "The Definitive Book on Body Language." Great book to start out with. Uh, Ghost of Honor, I wouldn't say that reading body language is the easiest thing to do. It's actually one of the things that takes the longest to learn, but once you learn it, it becomes easier. So you can suggest some books for deduction. There's some links down below to some books. Can I figure out your eye color right now? No. Not everything is deducible from one sentence and a profile picture that's actually a drawing. So no. And since eye color isn't a conscious choice, unless you're wearing contact lenses that change your eye color, but I'm assuming that you're not, because statistical probability. Eye color isn't something that people choose, so you can't determine what something like that is based off of an analysis of the person's personality. So, how does a mind palace work? I've explained this about like 20 minutes ago. What if a person is trying to counterfeit his personality? Does it get hard to deduce him? Well, that in and of itself is telling. Why is a person counterfeiting a personality? Why is a person portraying a facade? And spoiler alert, everyone portrays a facade. That's the whole motto of the channel, is see the truth behind the facade. You're not going to be able to get a person's genuine personality from looking at them superficially. Obviously, they're going to be constructing something that makes themselves look better, because everyone wants to look like a good, decent person, because that makes us feel better. We want to show other people the best parts of ourselves and forget about those bad parts, which isn't necessarily the healthiest thing to do. You should accept who you are, not in the sense of accepting and then doing nothing about it. You should understand the things that you don't like about yourself, so that you can make yourself better instead of pretending that you're better. But anyway, that's a topic for another day. If obviously a person is going to present themselves as better than what they actually are, and they're going to be trying to convince other people that, because they're trying to convince themselves of that. So yes, people will conjure up personalities. Now, for more In more manipulative people, the conjuring up of personalities is going to be more of a calculated measure. So those are going to be the people who are going to be better at making personalities. They're going to be the ones who are better at distracting people from seeing that their personality is fake by being charming and by getting people to like them. So if you see an overly likable, seemingly inhumanly charismatic person, might want to look for some psychopathic or sociopathic tendencies there. But in general, based off of what a person is presenting, right, you can get an idea of what they're trying to hide. Also, looking at people when they think no one's looking at them, that's how you get it. That's how you get some of that genuine person coming out. Even just when they glance away and they have that little contempt smile just like flash on their face when they think no one's watching, but you're watching because you're being observant and you're being discreet about how you observe. So yeah, that's how you do that. Do you find it difficult to do self deductions? Like what you just said in your videos, to understand others, we have to understand ourselves. Uh, Typically speaking, no, I don't have much of a problem with it. One of the things I like to do, one of the exercises I like to do is called reverse deductions. I like to imagine myself as an outside eye, as if I was another person looking at something that I'm doing. Would I be able to deduce something about me if I wasn't me? If that makes any sense. So that's always a fun exercise. It helps understand the process of observation and deduction. But as far as digging deep into my own personality and all my faults and failures, I'm pretty good at pointing out the things to myself that I'm doing wrong. So I don't really have too much of a problem with that. Do you think that learning deduction would be useful in a courtroom, apart from detectives and that stuff? Yes, definitely. If you're thinking about being a lawyer, which would be another one of the main professions that you would be in a courtroom a lot, uh, being able to read a crowd is essential because you have to read a jury, right? You have to be able to appeal to them as evidence is presented and their perspective changes. You have to win them over. You have to know how to employ social engineering to be able to present yourself and the evidence you're presenting in a way that is palatable to the crowd you are presenting it to. So, yes, deduction can be useful to a lawyer or just anyone in a courtroom that has to present something to a jury. So, yeah. Where did I learn this information from? Some books, links in the description, but mainly trial and error. What do I think about hypnotism? It's interesting. I like it a lot. I'm trying to learn more about it, learn how to do it. There's some really interesting science behind it, and it's a useful skill to have. It's a dangerous skill to have potentially, but am I real self-conscious and worried by the fact that everyone here is trying to read you? Not particularly. I'm quite okay with who I am, and I've had people try and read me before in videos and in live streams. I'm pretty desensitized to it. Um, Being the type of person who likes to find the truth in things, I don't like to be the person who presents lies about myself unless it's in a calculated way. So in a conversation like this, and I consider this a conversation, I I present myself as I am without trying to polish. In my videos, I get criticized with the voice that I do, and you know that is what it is. I look back on some of my old videos, and my voice is pretty cringy. And when you're recording something by yourself, it's a lot different. You have to listen to your voice over and over again. You want it to sound better to yourself, and so you play around with it, and then you don't realize how pretentious you're sounding, and it's uh it's just it's a different thing entirely. And plus, there's my face isn't being seen for the most part. I'm a cartoon character in those videos, so there's a little bit of depersonalization. But in something like this, I'm not trying to hide anything, and I don't really care what you guys find because you're not going to find anything too damning. So, how to deduct very fast? Well, we're not doing taxes here, so it'd be deduce. But squabbling over terminology aside, um, learning how to deduce fast has to do with just training, getting better, uh, creating. When you do years and years of training in this skill, you get faster because it becomes second nature to you. I actually let myself get hypnotized once, just to see how it worked, and from there I started to deconstruct the concept. I can do some hypnotism, but I need a willing participant. I can't do like a Darren Brown hypnotism where I just like put my hand on a person's forehead and just like put them in a trance. I can't do hypnotism if the person isn't willing to be hypnotized. At this stage, and it takes a while for me to get someone in a hypnotic trance. That being said, I really haven't done the research that I need to do to be better at that. I'm just kind of winging it at this point and just playing around with it. I just haven't had the time to get into it too much. Died at the taxes joke. Yeah, that's what comes to my mind whenever anyone says deduct as opposed to deduce in this context. So, what are my thoughts on supernatural elements? They might exist and they might not. Last stream, we had a long talk about religion, which I cut out. I'm not doing that again. Let's not talk about supernatural things. Questions, questions, questions. Come with your questions. When I take those long walks, is it because you are looking for something, trying to find areas of your city you haven't explored, or is it because you feel trapped? Um, I suppose sometimes I feel trapped and cooped up in my house, and I just need to go for a walk. But uh, when I go out, I'm going out just to clear my head. I think get to the do like to read people is partly practice, and so yeah, I just like walking, especially when it's cold out, which doesn't happen for very long in Florida, so that's unfortunate. Speaking of taxes, I got a tax return from a form today at work, but I'm only 16 and can't do anything with it. What do I do? I've been led to believe you're good at deducting. Real question. Okay, so a tax return form for a job is basically um, so a lot of jobs will take money off of your paycheck uh, to so that you don't have to spend a lot of time paying taxes. So they'll basically put your a portion of your paycheck away so that they can pay those taxes for you. Your tax returns it's not a refund, and it's basically those that what they take off your paycheck is an estimate. So your tax returns are whenever they overestimate. right, and take off a little too much from your paycheck, and it's not required by law that you that's not the percentage that the government requires from your taxes. So you get the rest of that money that the government doesn't need from you, right? So that's a tax return form. Usually involves your social security number, stuff like that. Um, I just signed one the other day for, well, the other week for my job, getting on payroll. So, hey, bro, trying to make some videos about how to find someone's occupation, please. We'll be getting into that in the methodology of deduction series. So, good night, all you people who are going away. Come to Michigan in that place. Please take a cold away. I would love to. I love wearing long coats and such, and scarves and all that jazz, and I never get to wear it. I get to wear it for like 3 days here in Florida. It's insane. Regarding trying to find someone's occupation using deduction, that would be amazing. It's a fun thing that you can do. A little disclaimer: sometimes you're not going to be able to get their specific occupation. You can usually narrow it down to manual labor, non-manual labor, indoor or outdoor work. That's the easiest thing that you can do. But we'll get into that later in various videos. The art of taxes. Nothing, no topic more engaging and sexy than taxes. That'll really, and put taxes in the thumbnail. You'll get the views. You'll get that daily YouTube grind. It's gonna be awesome. Yeah, don't just take my word on the whole tax return form thing. That's just a very basic, rudimentary explanation. Ask your parents, do your research. Um, but that's the general concept of that. So, any tips for getting over social anxiety? Learn to look people in the eyes. So, um, like like I said before, I don't like territorial displays of people, right? So, like me looking at them, I stare right back into their eyes until they look away. As you get more so you really have to force yourself into situations that make you uncomfortable, and after enough times of realizing nothing bad is going to happen to you just by looking at someone, you'll start to be more comfortable with looking at those people, right? For starters, instead of looking at them in their eyes, you can look at them right here, their nose, right? So it looks like you're looking at them in the eyes, pretty much, but it doesn't give you that same psychological, social anxiety that you get when you look at someone in the eyes. Um, you can also do territorial body language displays, which will boost your confidence and lower their confidence, which will help with the social anxiety. So spreading your legs a little bit more. Um, so if you look at like salesmen, this is an interesting little anecdote. There was a salesman I was observing, and he was trying to sell this product, and his face was, very, very nice, very kind looking expressions on his face. His hands were very open with his body language, but then you look at his feet, and his feet were like spread apart, like double shoulder length. And you know, once you actually notice that, it looks really weird. But it's a very old territorial display where you're literally claiming more territory, right? And that sends a subconscious message, even though the person doesn't consciously observe that. It sends a subconscious message that you are claiming territory. Um, that will actually help boost your confidence. Square your shoulders, raise up your chin. That'll help boost your confidence. Um, uh, Meditation helps with really pushing yourself in situations they logical or less confident. Um, so yeah. do you believe people can be born gifted with deduction skills? I think there are certainly people who have more of a proclivity to this than others, higher IQ, proclivity to observation, proclivity to understanding people. Yes, there are people who are just more geared towards this than others. That being said, that doesn't mean a person who isn't geared towards this can't get good. I, for one, was a very unobservant child. Sure, I have fairly decent IQ, and uh, I'm a pretty reflective thinker. But as a child, I would always handle abstract concepts in my head rather than observe the world around me. And so, yeah, that is so basically what I tell people is your natural talent and proclivity to certain things is your starting point, right? The talented person is right here, and the not so talented person is right here, right? Through hard work and dedication, that not so talented person can develop a skill level that will exceed the rate of growth of the talented person. Because people who aren't naturally talented in something sometimes have a greater drive and more grit to actually work hard to get the things that they don't have. And that actually helps them to have more of a respect for the things that they get, because people who are just born with natural talents might not have the respect that those talents deserve, and so they might misuse them, or they might not take care of them, they might not further them, and then before you know it, the talented person who started at a good spot hasn't improved, and the not so talented person who has been day in and day out to get better and better and better has surpassed them. Now, obviously, if the talented person works hard too, they can get better themselves. Basically, moral of the story is never be content with the point that you're at. Always try and get better. Oh no, I just saw the word Trump and now I'm worried. How is it to live in a place where Trump is the president? Is he really a jerk? We don't get much info about it around here. You're asking the wrong person. I'm apolitical and registered as an independent. I try and stay out of these sort of things. How to make people tell you the truth when you know they're lying, other than the method of just keeping quiet and waiting for them to tell us. Raise the stakes. So this could be getting closer to them, getting up in their personal bubble. Again, maintaining eye contact is key. That is a very powerful, very um, um, very uh, um, effective means of establishing dominance is maintaining eye contact, staring at a person. Sociopaths and psychopaths employ this quite frequently. Um, Getting closer, bursting their bubble, asking them questions, pressuring them, one question after another to the point where they're trying to remember the lie, but it takes more effort to remember the lie than the truth. So eventually, as you keep pressuring them with questions, they might eventually crack and tell you the truth, along with those other imposing things that you're doing to sort of intimidate them. How much can education in psychology help with making deductions? It certainly helps a lot. I'm studying it right now, and it's helped me with understanding psychological trends, understanding psychological principles. It helps you just understand. It's just another layer you add to your analysis. Do I have a girlfriend? No, I'm currently single. And I see we're still talking about Trump. Tina Woodworth. I've seen your comments before. You have a bachelor's in of science and psychology. It's indispensable. There you go. Psychology does help. Any other questions, people? I think I'm gonna end this stream pretty soon here. Let's give it another 10 minutes, a couple more questions, and then I think we'll say goodnight. What made you first decide to deduce? And do you have any book you'd recommend us to read on deduction? There are links to a couple books that I really like in the description down below. The monographs and Maria Konikova's book Mastermind How to Think Like Sherlock Holmes. What got me into deduction was I wanted to be able to help people and I wanted to be able to understand people. The latter influence has become more and more my goal. Tina Woodworth says, yes, it's amazing. I'm a private investigator as well. That is awesome. I need to pick your brain. Email me or something. I would love to know more about that. Is it possible to know ATM PIN number by manipulating conversation to get a clue about the PIN? I know certain mentalists have been able to get people's PIN numbers. I need to ask Ben Cardall how you actually do that. But I'm sure that's a technique they tend to keep pretty close to the chest. I don't know how they do it. The email is theartofdeductivereasoning@gmail.com. Why do people date? If you think about it, it doesn't make sense. It actually makes perfect sense when you think about it in a non-cynical way. And even when you look at it in a cynical way, under certain modes of analysis, dating makes perfect sense and no sense at the same time. It's no one wants to bear through this tragic existence alone. It's difficult. We're designed to want to have companionship. We seek this in friendships. We seek this in partnerships. We seek this in family. Um, there's much more. There's a lot of emphasis in our species on monogamy, and that has to do with the female primarily, because the female is the one bearing the child. She's the one who delivers the child. She's the one that has the higher um, risk involved with the perpetuation of the species. The male could potentially go and, you know, often do his thing with multiple different females and not have to pay any of the consequences. So the thing is, uh, women are um, selective maters, and that puts pressure on males to be um, not only fit, healthy, and good for production of future offspring, but um, also loyal, because that is a factor uh, in a woman's analysis of a man to see if he is a good partner. So, because raising a child is not an easy thing, so obviously there's going to be this push for a um, some sort of cohesive relationship that lasts so that you can actually raise up the child, because we have such big brains that we need like 22 years before our brains are fully developed. That is that so we need there has to be some sort of family or culture or family or group structure that helps raise children, right? So monogamous mating makes a lot of sense. And women put pressure on men to do that because women are selective maters. Yes, and Tina Woodworth puts it Puts it well. Biological pairing is a survival instinct. Dating is to find the strongest, most viable mate. Exactly. It's dating is a selection process on the road to a sort of something that approximates what we now call marriage, right? A monogamous relationship that is supposed to last a lifetime. Okay, so you say you understand that, but you mean more in the way of modern society. Friendship is far more honest than any other relationship. Courting makes more sense than dating. I mean, the terminology starts to kind of fade away at some point. Yes, there is a lot of uh, fluff in the dating process. Partners who pair up for physical means only, and there's methods of preventing the perpetuation of the species these days, if we are going to put it tastefully. So, with that, there is higher proclivity for promiscuity because there is less risk involved in that act. So, yes, there is a lot of bland and unemotional uh, romantic encounters in this era. And yes, courting in the traditional sense of looking for someone and developing a romantic attachment to them is a more stable way to do things. Um, I'm not going to even get into the territory of telling people how to live their lives. You do you. Um, but statistically speaking, yeah. And I think on that note, we're going to end it. So, it has been a lovely evening chatting with all of you, and hope to see you all again sometime soon. So, thank you all so much for watching, and links in the description to Patreon, social. You can follow me on the social media, so Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Uh, there's some links to some books and some other interesting uh, stuff in the description down below. So, have a good night. When is the next live stream? Whenever I feel like it. So, with that being said, thanks for watching, all you spying detectives out there. Arrivederci.